I don't know if you saw Flow. Flow is a movie that came out last year. It won Best Animated Feature. It was a film that had no dialogue whatsoever. And I was kind of surprised by this, about how successful it was, but also it was a deeply beautiful, deeply emotional movie. And this year, Kid Koala, Montreal's own Kid Koala, has come out with his own film. It's another animated feature that also has no dialogue.
Since you could crawl, that you would grow to see it all. I'm so enthralled with every little thing you do.
I talked to Rachel Ho about that film, and actually what I got out of that conversation is this reminder that Canada actually has a lot of history in animation. We have made some really significant sort of contributions to the realm of animation, and it's no surprise that a film like Space Cadet would come out of Montreal. Rachel Ho was wonderful in this conversation. I hope that you enjoy it. Get into it. Rachel, it's good to see you. How you doing, pal?
Good, good. Charlie Chaplin didn't do it for you for silent film?
No, he didn't.
Couldn't get on with Charlie Chaplin.
No, and as a result, Space Cadet is the thing that's going to fix it. Okay, we mentioned that Space Cadet is based on a graphic novel that Kid Koala wrote, so some people might actually be already familiar with that story, but, you actually think it works to kind of go into this movie not knowing anything about it. Why is that?
I mean, I'd argue that pretty much every movie, if it's not a sequel, you're probably better off going into the movie not knowing anything about it. It's a clean slate is a beautiful thing. Like,
that's true.
If I told you there's this movie about an aspiring astronaut and her robot guardian who likes to wear a snazzy orange bow tie for special occasions, you'd probably have a few assumptions about it. You would feel a certain way about it, or that it's silent. Like you'd think a certain way. You might think it's a kid's movie. You might dismiss it. And it is very kid friendly, I will say. But I think you would miss out on this really gorgeous movie about grief, relationships, connections, seasons in life. Like you would miss out on a lot if you just went in with a bunch of assumptions, I think.
Now, you dragged me for not being into Charlie Chaplin movies, but Kid Koala says that Charlie Chaplin was a big inspiration for this particular movie. He says he remembers watching Charlie Chaplin movies with his grandmother who didn't speak English, and how they were like the only movies that could maybe share together between the two of them. Do you see the Charlie Chaplin influence in this movie as you watch it?
Absolutely. And I think it's such a sweet story, too, that Kid Koala shared about his family. That, it's not even just the silent aspect. It's not just the fact that there's no dialogue. There's a lot of slapstick comedy, a lot of the humor that I think Chaplin did so well. Like, that is in this movie, too. There's also a good amount of heart in it, which I think Charlie Chaplin was very good about imbuing all of his characters. No matter how zany and wacky they were, there was a lot of heart involved. And I think Space Cadet does that. Like, it reminds me of these kids movies. It does remind me of kids movies from when I was younger. Like the Dumbos, the Lion Kings, the Bambis, the ones that were a little bit more difficult to look at times, like a little bit more challenging. My mom and I went to it was the opening night for Real Asian last year, the Real Asian Film Festival, and we went to go watch it. She thought it was going to be a really cutesy, like, kids movie, and then it turns out to be a lot deeper and a lot more, like, grief-stricken than I think either of us expected. But, it is not a kid movie, and it is a kid movie at the same time. But I think there's some really genuine moments that will just like tug on your heartstrings.
I want to come back to that idea of whether it's a kid movie or not a kid movie in just a moment. But because it's an animated movie that doesn't have any dialogue, the comparisons to Flow were going to be inevitable, right? Like, that's a movie that wins Best Animated Feature last year. It makes a lot of noise because actually it's been quite some time since that's happened. It was about a cat whose home had been devastated by a flood. How do you compare the two of them side by side? Do they have a lot of overlap or similarity?
I mean, the most simplistic comparison is, yes, there's no dialogue. One is more kid friendly. One is maybe a bit more adult friendly, I would say. Flow was a very message movie. It was really about the environment, and it was looking at using animals as a way to kind of distance the audience a little bit and build that empathy with an arm's length reach. And I think Space Cadet actually does something very similar, using a robot instead of using, say, parents or other types of guardians or whatever in your life. We're seeing this very not strange, but an alien-like object that is not human. And we're able, again, to build that empathy chip, I think, really well. So to me, that's the biggest crossover between the two, beyond kind of the more surface details.
I'll tell you what really struck me about Space Cadet is the animation style, because I don't think I've seen a lot of movies in this kind of animation style. What do you want to describe it for a moment?
I find it to be a combination of little twin stars. I don't know if you know who little twin stars are.
I
They're
don't.
these little, very cutesy, like little Asian Sanrio characters that I grew up with, and they're very sweet. But it reminds me of that. And then Babar, the elephant show that we
Of
grew up
course.
with when we were kids in Canada.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a combination of the two in 3D. So it has the throwback retro feel of those cartoons that I grew up with.
Yeah.
But then it's very fresh. It's very innovative. It is very, very 2025, 26 as well. And like Lillian Chan and Gilles Renault, they were the two Canadians, one from Toronto, one from Montreal, who like together they put the animation together. And I think that they did an extraordinary job. It's really beautiful.
I think one of the tricky things about Space Cadet is that like it's because it's from Kid Koala, and Kid Koala is someone who's known for giving us music. Like in this particular case, like this is a movie that he wrote the score for this movie. It includes music he composed to accompany his graphic novel of the same name. He also recorded new versions of a couple of classic songs, like "They Can't Take That Away From Me" by Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. He collaborated with Martha Wainwright for that. There's no dialogue in a movie. I feel like music can sort of really do a lot of heavy lifting in a sense. What did
Sure.
you think of the musical choices here?
I won't lie, the first time I watched it, I didn't clock the music. It wasn't something that stood out to me.
Okay.
But I think it's actually a compliment to the film because I think everything was seamless. Everything
Yeah.
came together, melted together. So not one thing just stood out to me. I watched it a second time over the weekend, and I have to say that song you mentioned, "They Can't Take That Away From Me,"
Yeah.
it really stuck out to me this time around because it's a simple song. It's got a simple melody to it, but the lyrics are so heart-wrenching. Like this idea of you're going to remember the little details of the people that you love. You're going to carry those things on together. And I think it is entirely reflective of the entire story of Space Cadet. And I think what the purpose of Space Cadet is in many ways.
Now, some of the context that we need here is that Space Cadet was made and produced in Canada, but not too long ago on this very show. We talked with the Canadian animation studio Nelvana, Pausing Productions, and Nelvana's created some iconic stuff. Like they've made Care Bears, they made the Magic School Bus. You mentioned Babar, that was made by Nelvana. We talked about the impact of that recent shutdown on the show, but how do you think Canada's animation scene is doing right now?
It's so interesting because to me, Canada has a great reputation in the movie industry for documentary, like historically documentary, comedy, of course. Like those are the two greatest kind of jewels, I would say, in the Canadian cinema crown. But animation sometimes is a little bit underrated, and I would completely push against that because Canada has had an immense impact on the animated world and potentially not like on Canadian films. So maybe we don't register it straight away. But a lot of times when you watch a movie, or so when I watch a movie and I go, "Oh, that animated element looks really interesting," or I just find something about it, it piques my interest and I go, I need to look up where these things were done.
Yeah.
I tell you, 9 out of 10 times, it's an animation house in Montreal that is doing the
Really?
post-production work.
Yeah.
It is fascinating to me that like they don't get enough credit for it, but they also have a really healthy video game industry, making
Yeah.
video games in Montreal. So I think that potentially might be a lot of the crossover involved there. But I have a lot of respect for the Montreal animation game. Movie houses around the world have a lot of respect for
Yeah.
the Montreal animation game. And so I hopefully we could get a new Nelvana up eventually one day because I think it's wonderful to have Canadian products made for the Canadian audience.
Yeah.
But don't think that like they're not existing whatsoever. They are very, very, I think, highly respected and highly sought out after as well.
Not to make you put you out of a position to speculate, but do you have a sense of why that might be that we don't think of ourselves as a sort of a powerhouse for animation? Got about a minute left here.
I mean, potentially maybe because docs and comedy seem to be so much stronger and so much more prevalent in the history. And like I said, the animation side, it is more in the background. Like it is a bit more of a quieter thing, whereas comedy is, we have these wonderful comedic actors who are really in your face and they make a big splash.
We know their
around the
faces,
world.
we know their names, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. And then documentary, that's a historic aspect. Like documentary is something that has its roots in Canada. So I think it's more of just you don't see it as like it's not as direct, I suppose, like right in your face as these other aspects are, but shouldn't be ignored though. Not at all.
Listen, I was watching Babar in Sudan as a kid growing up, and it was sort of translated there. So like that's like a really significant thing that this country's produced. I got to say thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, pal.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Good to see you. Rachel Ho is a film editor for Exclaim, and also Space Cadet is in theaters right now in Quebec and opens across the rest of the country starting on March 6th. That is it for the podcast today. In the meantime, time, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. We'd love to see you then.